for being here. The youth climate leaders. Thank you, everybody. Ryan Qualls, Yuhat Duasak. Setanish Ayah Ah Sayi. Klet Kahena. Ryan Qualls. I'm called Ryan Qualls. My name in Tliket is Setanish, and I'm called Ryan Qualls in English. I come from the Eagle, Moiety, and the Kagwantan clan. I am of the Sitka Kagwantan of the Burning House. Sitka, Alaska is where primarily my family comes from. I'm a child of the Kagwantan and a grandchild of the Kiksati Frog clan. We are the people of Shetkakwan Awa Uhan. I was born in Nistlayam Elwa, Yehat Kutsiti, Port Angeles as it's known, and I currently live in Port Angeles, but also share spaces in Bellevue, Seattle, and various many territories across Pacific Northwest and Western Washington. I just want to say thank you and give a land acknowledgement to the people of this area of the Whidbey Island and Oak Harbor areas, known as the Lower Skagit, which the Lower Skagit had, I think, a majority of the northern part of Whidbey Island, and they shared the southern part of Whidbey Island with the Stillaguamish, I believe, per the native-land.ca and Treaty of Point Elliott of 1855, when the treaty was done in, I believe, Mukilteo. And I believe the land here is called the Klatoschia.
Close enough.
Thank you. Strantolchi.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, that sounds a lot better. Sorry, just practicing my Salish, my Lashutsi. I'm Tlingit, we speak Tlingit. And Klalum is the next language. So yeah, I just wanted to share that part of my activism is I'm one of the protectors of the Salish Sea, meaning to protect the trees, the fish, the land, to help mitigate climate change. I also have been one of the indigenous members of the Black Action Coalition, so for civil rights. I've been to Washington, D.C. for protesting against Kavanaugh, for Supreme Court Justice. We've done different things like kayaktivism in Port Angeles for the fish farms when that was happening in 2018. And then some of my other affiliations are the City of Bellevue Center and Communities of Color Coalition, as I do work in Bellevue, and I'm one of the shareholders of the Sea Alaska Corporation. That's one of our corporations in Alaska. We do things a little bit differently than the lower contiguous 48s. So in Alaska, in 1971, we have Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which that was to say that our resources were taken instead of having things like casinos built on the land, which actually we found that casinos are very profitable, and so in Juneau we're going to have one built just since it's out there for our economy, you know, and to help the people. While it's not our favorite thing, it is something that, you know, we would use to help our community, and that's, you know, one of the areas that we do want to cover. So I just want to share some info about the native tribes of Whidbey and Camino. On January 22nd, 1855, the Treaty of Point Elliott, a land settlement treaty between the United States government and Native American tribes of the Greater Puget Sound area, was signed at Point Elliott, now Mukilteo, Washington, and ratified the 8th of March and 11th of April, 1859. Signatories to the Treaty of Point Elliott included Chief Seattle and Territorial Governor Isaac Stevens. There were representatives from the Duwamish, Suquamish, Snoqualmie, Snohomish, Lummi, Skagit, Swinomish, and other tribes that also had signed. The treaty established the Suquamish, Port Madison, Tulalip, Swinomish, and Lummi reservations. The story and presence of those who sacrificed much of their original ancestral land will forever be a part of history. A story of a people who cultivate, work, and nourish the land in hopes that all of its inhabitants would benefit from its wealth. This interpretive map is dedicated to the many tribes that call Whidbey and Camino Island home. May their stories and contribution to this area continue to uphold a place in our memory and our future. Part of the land acknowledgement, and the reason for land acknowledgements, is to recognize indigenous ways and the people of the land, the Anyak Kusani, the people that have been here since time immemorial. And these people are the Lower Skagit. Recognizing indigenous ways and that we are all indigenous signifies our devotion, commitment, and ancestral ties to this land, to this earth. And by doing that, it means we're practicing consent and permission to one another, to this land, and to the respect of this earth as our relative. The reason the Lower Skagit aren't here currently today is because they were disbanded and dispersed into part of the Tulalip and Swinomish tribes. And so some of those families you'll see now there today in those areas. And to try and rectify for their land being taken, all of the territory on Whidbey Island, they were only given $79,000 by the government. Part of my reason for coming out here and for caring about the earth is because I grew up in Port Angeles listening to the songs, to the drums of the Elwha people, knowing that those were my family and that we all shared a common cause. When you see tribal clans, stories, dances, you find that there's a lot of reverence for animals, and animals are something I care greatly about. For me, there was not always a connection to my pride and where I grew up, and for my identity. In Port Angeles, there was, we were definitely a minority. One of the first instances of connections that I had was my uncle had cancer back in 2016. That's when I moved back from Washington, D.C. To go help take care of him and my aunt, as we do in part of our indigenous ways in our tribes. And so he had this dog, Gigi, and we also had Peppy, but Gigi was the one that was older. And so after he died, that was his best friend. And a month later, she died of loneliness, recognizing, his departing from this earth and walking into the forest. There's another instance that caught my attention. It's kind of a funny one. My little sister and her girlfriend, they lived with us back in 2020 for a few months, and they would go to sit out and kind of enjoy themselves and relax on the beach in Elwha Beach, and they'd smoke. And I don't know if it was the smoke or the medicine, but for them, they somehow attracted this seal that would always come by. The seal would also come whenever Peppy came to the beach with us, but it was pretty cool to see. It was like things that, when we're told animals are so far disconnected from us that they are lesser beings, I recognize and feel that isn't the truth. Another instance was when I was with my sister's mom. We were up in Juneau, and there was this raven, a whole bunch of ravens up on this hotel, and they were all cawing. They were and making those really cool sounds. I think, ravens know about 260 different words and several different distinct sounds. They're very intelligent animals. So anyways, we walked over, and next to the raven, we saw it playing, and it was like on top of the roof. It started pecking at something. We weren't sure what it was, but we were like, hey, what are you doing? You want something shiny? Then it looked up at us, and then it grabbed a pop can and threw it up in the air and chucked it over the side. And we were like, you want another shiny? So we held out some quarters, and then it came down and started walking down the road, and I just followed it. And it's moments like these that I really enjoy and share with our environment, our existence, knowing that there are other creatures than humans that really have their own spirit, their own ability to love, to nurture, to care for one another, for this earth. And I think that might be one of the biggest difficulties sometimes that we have as humans, is that we always think that we're the center of this universe. And part of a paradigm change is, maybe going back to not what we've become, or, because in many ways we're also becoming so much better, but also practicing much of the indigenous ways, of the people of the land. And I know it's a strong fight, it's taken a lot, but it all helps. It always helps. Being out here today, this helps. You know, going to legislators, talking to the courthouse, talking to your teachers, talking to the children, talking to each other during food. You know, it all makes a difference, because it took a long ways for us to regress, for us to decline as a people and our earth, but we are able to repair it and heal. It's our dreams. It's the earth sending us a message that we need to. So I want to share a couple stories. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the sword, the stick, the rock, and the water story from the Zapotecas, but I've been given permission to share this among a couple others. So, speaking on the idea of colonization, on the ideas of boasting sometimes in an unnecessary way, or greed and just dominance and misogyny and assertion where it doesn't need to be had. The sword walks out into the forest, you know, all tall, proud, and dancing like this, side to side. And the first person it comes to is the stick. Stick is like just minding its own business, you know, in the woods, not paying attention much to the sword. And the sword was like, hey, you over there. Stick was like, meh. And sword was like, yeah, you. Stick says, what? What's up? And so the sword says, hey, I bet you I can beat you in a battle. And if I win, you tell everybody that I'm the winner, and I get to keep your area, your space. So the stick says, okay, let's go. So the stick and the sword, they battle, and the stick's like, I think I got you, you know, and the sword's like, no, I'm a lot harder than you. I have so much more strength. I've been built by the toughest materials and the best technologies. And eventually the stick almost had him, but then he fell. So next, the sword, after he wins over the stick, and obviously he makes those claims, he's like, I'm the best, I beat the stick. The rock walks over, and the rock's like, okay, the stick was one of my good friends. You messed with the wrong person. Let's battle. And I'm here to protect this area, this land. So the sword, they clash, and they clash, and they clash for a good amount of time, until eventually parts break off the rock and starts to chip away until it becomes smaller and less able to fight with the sword. And the sword again boasts and is like, I beat you. I am the champion. I got your land. Nearby the both of them was watching water, and water sees the stick and the rock fall, and the sword is still there. And the sword says, I beat you both. And she says, okay, this is your last chance. You can go, or if you want, you can fight me, but you can do what you must, and I don't know if you'll win, but you can try. Go ahead, give it your all. So the sword starts bashing in the water and splashing and splashing, and the sword's like, you were easy. You were the easiest of the three. And the water says, I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm still here. And the sword's like, what? What do you mean? And so the sword keeps going as hard as it can, just putting as much energy as it can into this fight, thinking that it needs to be had, that it needs to make claim to this area, that it needs to prove it's the best. So it starts getting tired, more and more tired, and eventually it falls into the water. It's just can't move much, and eventually it starts to rust and fall away. The water doesn't say anything. The water just stays there forever, keeping with the land, knowing it stood its place and held together. And sorry with that.
Oh.
Another to signify, so thinking of these Zapotecas, another to signify some of the importance of traditional indigenous stories. One is was shared to me long ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, by Chief Bill James. This was the story about the tsunami that had taken place all along the coast. maybe 300 years ago, maybe many, many, many times before. But so there was the grandmothers and grandfathers that heard that, you know, there was a dream they had that something was coming, that there was a tremble in the land, and they knew that when it was getting closer, they had to prepare. So they told their children and their grandchildren, hey, we want you to go make canoes. We'll teach you. We want you to go next to the trees because the trees will hold you. You know, we'll put these canoes next to the trees with some rope and they'll withstand what's coming. But we want you to prepare by getting your foods ready, by being able to survive this, what's about to happen. You know, they didn't want to scare the children in the next generation, but they were like, we want you to survive. We need you to survive. You are the caretakers of this land. So eventually the tsunami comes, you know, and it starts slowly, but they can see it for, what, miles away. And it comes and it crosses over the land and lifts up the canoes. And during that time, you know, they were just waiting for it. But I think the kids were already asleep, most of them. And they were up in the canoes, you know, as many as they had, but they only had enough for the children by that time. And so the children, as the canoes receded, the water receded, they were there and they said, hey, we made it, but our parents are gone. You know, and they prepared us for this, but now we were taught with enough teachings of what to do. And so they heard that for how to survive, how to continue on, they, you know, paired off and went in different directions. They went some to go gather berries and make jams, you know, and some would go off and pair and go get fish. And so they were also known as like the fish clan, you know, and others would pair off and go get clams or oysters. And they say that this was one of the ways that they identified with what they were showing reverence towards, and how much they cared about what they were gathering and this earth. And so that's why we need to show the youth the importance of these traditional knowledge, you know, is that we never know, even through technology and what we have today, how important it will be for our future. And that's what geologists from universities all over, especially studying the Pacific Rim, biologists, oceanographers, had to learn about, was the past stories, the indigenous teachings of what happened, where, and that's why following the indigenous ways, it's not mythic folklore, it's there for a reason, and it's there to respect the earth. And they're there to respect the earth because we care so much, and we need to care that much about them. That's part of decolonial thinking, I believe, you know. And I want to share, you know, that I'm not only Native, you know, I'm Mexican, so Mexica, and then I'm French, Scottish, Russian, Polish, Irish, British, Norwegian, and Spanish. And there was one time, I was in Colorado Springs last year, there was a man, his name was also Ryan, we met on the bus, and he said, hey, did you know that 25% of the people in Ireland still speak Gaelic? And I was like, wow, you know, for that amount of people to still speak their indigenous language, that's amazing. And he's like, yeah, and do you know what our name was or is in Gaelic? And I said, no, what is it? He said, the name is Ridian. And he's like, do you know what it means? And I said, no, I don't. What does it mean? I said, it means Star of Hope. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing. You know, I thought it meant Little King. He's like, it does in English, but even better in Gaelic, it means Star of Hope. And I was like, you're right, thank you. So, you know, I just want to say that all of us connecting back to our ways, you know, finding about who we are, and respecting the people of the land wherever we are, always shows importance to this earth. And, you know, it only helps us grow together more as a people. So at this time, you know, there's NASA, there's the climate solutions, UN, various many people, you know, there's things we could do in the world as individuals and at a local level that are much greater than always focusing about what's happening on the outside. Although those are equally important. I would like to also share a story or two. So my favorite story is, for one of my favorite stories for our Tlingit culture, is the origin of the killer whale. And I'll read it to you. A man named Natsalane, belonging to the Sakwe, the seal people, made killer whales. He first tried to carve them out of red cedar, then out of hemlock, then out of all other kinds of wood in succession. He took each set of figures to the beach and tried to make them swim out, but instead they floated up on the surface. Last of all, he tried yellow cedar and was successful. He made these of different sorts. On one, he marked white lines with Indian chalk from the corners of its mouth back to its head. He said, "This is going to be the white-mouthed killer whale." When he first put them into the water, he headed them up the inlet, telling them that whenever they went up to the heads of the bays, they were to hunt for seal, halibut, and all other things under the sea. But he told them not to hurt a human being. When you are going up the bay, people will say to you, "Give us something to eat." Before this, people did not know what the killer whale is. Another thing people did not know was that the killer whale could go ashore and camp. One time, a man married a high-caste woman and went up to the head of a certain bay with her because he knew that the killer whales always went there. On the way, they saw a campfire blazing upon the shore. There were killer whales encamped here, but he thought they were human beings and landed to see them. When they got close in, he jumped into the water to urinate. All at once, the killer whale chief said, "I feel people's looks. Go outside and look on the beach." But when they saw him urinating, they started off, leaving their camp just as it was, jumped into the water and swam away. Then he went up to the camp with his wife, and they saw all kinds of food there. His wife said, "It is lucky that we came across this." And after a while, the man said, "Let us cook some, my wife." Then the woman took her cooking basket and put some water into it. Presently, she said, "Way out, there's a canoe coming." It was a black canoe, she said. "We better leave this alone until the canoe comes so that we can invite them to eat with us." Her husband said, "All right." By and by, his wife said, "What is the matter? To my eyes, it does not appear like a canoe. It is too black." It was really a young killer whale, under which the other killer whales were swimming to make it appear like a canoe. When the supposed canoe reached land, the whales rushed ashore, seized the woman, who had concealed herself behind her husband, and carried her down to the sea. They took her away because her husband had taken their provisions. This time, when the killer whales rose again, instead of appearing like only one canoe, they came up out of the water thick everywhere and began to swim down the bay very fast. Meanwhile, the husband went down to his canoe, got in, and paddled after them along shore. But when they came to a high cliff where the water went down deep, all the whales suddenly dived out of sight. Now the man climbed to the top of this cliff, fastened a bow to his head and another slim spruce bow around his waist, filled the space inside of the shirt with his rocks, and jumped into the ocean at the spot where his wife had disappeared, falling upon a smooth, mossy place on the bottom. When he awoke, he rose, looked about, and saw a long town nearby. He entered the last house, which proved to belong to the chief of the shark people. In this house, he saw a man with a crooked mouth peeping out from behind a post. A long time before, when he had been fishing, a shark had cut his line and carried off the hook, and it was this hook that now peeped out at him. It said, "Master, it is I. When your line broke, they took me down here and have made me a slave." Then he said to the shark chief, "Is there any news in this town?" And he replied, "Nothing special in our town, but right across from us is the killer whale's town. And recently, we heard that a woman had been captured there and is now married to the killer whale chief." Then the shark chief continued, "The killer whale chief has a slave who is always chopping wood back in the forest with a stone axe. When you come to him, say within yourself, 'I wish your stone axe would break.' Wish it continually." So the shark instructed him. Then he went over to the killer whale town, and when the slave's axe did break, he went up to him and said, "I will help you to fix that axe stone if you will tell me where my wife is." So he began to fix it in place for him. It was the only stone axe in the killer whale tribe. Then the slave said, "I always bring wood down and make a fire in the evening, after which my master sends me for water. When you see me going after water, come to the door and wait there for me. As soon as I come in, I'm going to push over the fire. At the same time, I'm going to empty the water into it so as to make a quantity of steam. Then rush in and carry out your wife." The man followed these directions and started away with his wife. Then his halibut hook shouted, "This way, my master, this way." So he ran toward the shark people's town and they pursued him. Now the killer whales attacked the shark people because they said that the sharks had instructed them what to do, and they killed many sharks. In return, the sharks began to make themselves strong. They were going out again to fight the killer whales. They went to some rocks and began sharpening their teeth. Then they began to battle, and whenever the killer whales approached, the sharks would run against their bellies and rip them open, letting out their entrails. The whole bay was full of killer whales and sharks. What happened to the woman is not told. When the killer whale tribes start north, the seals say, "Here comes another battle. Here comes the warriors." They say this because the killer whales are always after seals. Killer whales are of different kinds. And the one that always swims ahead is the red killer whale, called killer whale spear, Kikwusani. It was so named by the man who made these animals because he shaped it long and slender, the Tsakwedi, to which this man belonged, are a branch of the Ducklawedi. Therefore, the Ducklawedi are the only people who make the killer whale their emblem. On their way to us, the first killer whales came into a bay called Kotsleil, after Tsleil, the first man who came to that bay. They encamped at its head, and the day after began digging into the cliff. The land there is not very high, so they were soon through, laid skids down and carried their canoes across. Some people watched them. The killer whales always used to cross at the place where they laid down these skids, and now people cross there. It is called Killer Whale Crossing Place, Kitguni, but it is now overgrown with trees and underbrush. This place is said to be on the north arm of Tanaki Bay, where a canal has been projected to enable boats to reach Huna more easily. That's the end of the story, thank you. So, kind of to wrap things up, the way that we as Tlingit see energy in things is, you know, some of our regalia, some of what's in sometimes trees or bark or, you know, cedar or even food, things we've shared, is our atu. And our atu is very precious to us, you know. If someone were to take any of our atu or our favorite shirt or something, you know, we'd be very upset. And it wouldn't be fair to the others. It wouldn't be considerate of our future and of our you know, our youth. We want to pass those on to our family. So that's part of the indigenous ways, you know, some of the things we do. And I just wanted to share that and remind that here, you know, there are many places that are important to people of this land, and so where I grew up, you know, with the Klallam people, the Elwha River was part of their area. There's a boulder way up the Elwha River, and that's where the salmon people had grown. You know, they'd have their lay nests there, and then they'd have their hatchlings go out to the ocean, and they come back and grow. And when the Elwha Dam was there, a lot of the fish would die. They'd hit their heads against the wall and die, and so that's why there wasn't so many of a lot of the species and the populations that were there are no longer there. And so now, since the dams are down, there's been sediment expanding on the beaches. The life's been a lot happier. The environment has been a lot happier. The animals have been a lot happier. The plants have been a lot happier. You know, the waterway is going as it should be. And there's an elder in Australian Indigenous saying that if we don't go the way of the land will move us. Thank you.
Okay, next we have a student speaker this time who is a youth leader coming from Coopville High School. We have Ava next.
Sure, I'll go to work the microphone. Yeah. Okay, I can just like hold this up.
No, you don't have to hold anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Ava Mitten. I am 17. I'm a junior at Coopville High School, and I plan on going into environmental science and protecting the earth. I have been wanting to ever since I was a kid, and I felt a connection to nature. I love hiking, I love being outdoors, and this topic speaks really strong to me. In my 17 years of life, I have lived my whole life on Whidbey Island. Growing up here has taught me how much I love the earth. I spend as much time as I can outdoors, paddleboarding in Penn Cove during the summer and taking hikes along Eby's Trail during the colder seasons. And yet, in only 17 years of being alive, I have watched the crisis of climate change slowly eat away the place I call home. A couple summers ago, a heat wave hit western Washington, reaching staggering temperatures that were above 100 degrees, which killed off most of our shellfish and harmed some of the marine life that thrive in these colder waters. Not only did this event hurt the wildlife in Puget Sound and the waters of Juan-Tafuca, the heat wave impacted local businesses who depend on shellfish and aquatic resources. Last summer, we experienced one of the driest summers on record to hit Whidbey Island, and people didn't bat an eye. Climate change is a crisis and will continue to be the biggest issue for everything and everyone on Earth. A team of geologists put together a map of what coastal areas of Whidbey Island could look like in 15 to 30 years from now. And to put it lightly, Madrona Way could completely erode into the water, Front Street could end up underwater, and the housing along West Beach would be washed away under the threat of rising tides. Not to forget how the acidity in Puget Sound is becoming stronger, decaying the shells of mussels and other shellfish. And if the acidity continues to rise, we might not be the home for Pencove shellfish anymore. I'm not asking you to take care and dedicate your life to acting against the climate crisis, but I am asking you to listen, because our island, for one, is at risk against the concerns of rising tides. Forest fires have been to occur in the Northwest rather than just eastern Washington. And even with all these bright signs that it's time to take action, people will just say climate change is not real, as the snow-capped peaks are experiencing rain in the middle of winter. A protest is the first sign of change because without recognition, without understanding and awareness, we are not moving forward. How much longer can we strip lands for resources for profit when everything left has been looted, destroyed, trashed, and left inhabitable? Well, it doesn't affect me, but it does. As the ice melts in the Arctic and the sea temperatures rise, deadly hurricanes and unexpected weather patterns will become frequent. Climate change might not affect you directly, but it affects us, people, as a whole. And we are the problem, and because of that, it is our job to make things right. Declaring a climate emergency here in the city of Oak Harbor is necessary to open people's eyes and ears to the threats of their home, Whidbey Island, as well as the entirety of Earth. We started this mess, and it is our job to fight it. Voices are power, representation leads to action, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you came from. But if you can change your mind, and believe me, listen to the present and the possibilities of the future. If you are aware of what is going on, you are a part of change, a possibility of a greener and brighter future, and we thank you for doing so. Help us warn our community, get the city of Oak Harbor to take the first step towards change. With it is recognition, and declare a climate emergency here in the city of Oak Harbor. Thank you for listening to me at this time.
Tell me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like! Tell me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like.
Tell me what democracy looks like!